Let's move to an area defence related, which calls in Europe for greater scrutiny of the operations of the American AI software company, the giant leviathan of the industry, Palantir, primarily driven by privacy and data and security concerns in Europe. This is a tech giant. It's one of the most influential, one of the most sought after companies globally, providing military state-of-the-art analysis for the US, UK, Ukraine, Israel, NATO, the United Arab Emirates too, as well as for President Trump's anti-immigration ICE operations, also providing data in the UK for civilian contracts on healthcare, the NHS, French aircraft building at Airbus, and Germany's energy companies too. Now, the founder of Palantir, Alex Karp, has spoken in a recent interview with Axios of how the company helps the US military.
There's the kind of sexy, violent part of war, which obviously in this case would mean, honestly, for this commander, what it basically will mean is you will be ahead of your adversary. You'll be able to predict their actions. You'll be able to put the best effectors on the most important targets and the cheaper ones on less important targets, i.e., by the way, honestly, the most important thing Palantir does is prevent war.
It is a very interesting interview on Axios. You can see that on YouTube or on its site. The defence and security strategist Eva Sula is in the Estonian capital Tallinn, a former government official who now advises in the defence industry, including on EU and NATO critical infrastructure, and is a defence mentor for the NATO defence project called Diana, established to identify and accelerate dual-use technology. It is great to talk to you tonight, Eva. Let's start out. A lot of people might be listening and watching and thinking, OK, what exactly is Palantir? What does it do? Could you explain the concept of it, how it works?
So Palantir operates based on intelligence they're gathering and data and information they are extracting, for example, from Ukraine, from the battlefield. So in this sense, they have very good overview. And they are enhancing this with AI, different capabilities, and providing complex overviews. What is ongoing, helping identify the targets. So for Ukraine purposes, they are very critical because the data they are processing and the access to the data they have. But now when we talk about the other countries, then they provide also this information, but the challenge with them is like there is no transparency. How the models work, where the data goes, how it's governed, and so on. So this is this battle, in a sense, among the countries, where to go and what to do. And for example, Switzerland set out, like we've evaluated, and we chose not to, which was a very big statement.
It's very interesting. I want to go into, first of all, talk about the concept of the company, because it's very hard to separate the company itself from its founder, from Alex Karp, and probably worth talking about him and his vision, and perhaps how some critics might say he's bent to the prevailing wind, because he is the son of anti-war activists. He talked about the very moral, I think, an ethical concept of wanting to help share information with the West. He saw it as something that he would not share ever with China or Russia, this information. He opposed President Trump in the first term. He talks about, well, now we know that he says he doesn't take a view on that, but he's just been given a 10-year, $10 million contract with the US military a few months ago. This is somebody who is not just involved in the US and in the UK. Tell us how Palantir helps within NATO as well.
So in NATO, similar way how it ended in UK and US, straightforward, direct, very fast procurement, 6 months, and they are behind a program called Maven. And similarly, no competition, and they are assisting commanders with also intelligence, what is and what is not. So in this sense, it took away the competition side. Now this is in the headlines in UK. There were no competition, and also it puts these innovators or anybody who is trying to build anything similar in not the maybe most equal position with them, because they do not have access to this kind of data, and this is the policy challenge, and also military's own policies and doctrines and governance challenge, and over wider problem across Europe public sector. That there's so many contradictions to even label the data, so you overclassify it, and that limits everything. And that's why it is so tempting to have something fast when we have Russian threat. and we're lacking situation awareness of situations and the threats and what is ongoing.
When there is military talk about Palantir, is it fair to say, is it your understanding that in terms of battlefield analysis strategy, offering a guide of essentially advanced AI related strategizing that you can do kind of the best of war gaming, and therefore it's kind of an obvious point for the British military, perhaps for NATO, to say we need to be tapping into this because this is a bigger existential issue with a perceived wider threat from Russia to Europe. So you have that on the one side. But as you touch upon, and what the Financial Times has touched upon this weekend, saying that, quote, Palantir has captured the Ministry of Defence because of its infrastructure. And you quote this as well. You talk about the dependency issue. So it's okay if it is this level, that there's no rivals, competitors. But if there isn't, you're suddenly dependent.
Exactly, because to analyze and synthesize and to share the data, even between the systems, you need integration. That is architecture. And this comes through the integrational side. And that kind of what UK has now slightly stated out, that they are in a point where shifting becomes extremely expensive. And this has been similar debate over the public clouds for many, many years across Europe and in UK. Should we or shouldn't we? And we don't want to end up in vendor lock. Because getting out will be very expensive, even if there are very good alternatives. And now with the Palantir, we're seeing exactly the shift happening, while at the same time we're trying to minimize US-based cloud vendors. So in one way we're limiting, in the other way we are building the ties through the infrastructure and architecture. This is very unfortunate situation and changes in IT infrastructure, especially when we talk about military, which is being underfunded for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Then this is even more challenging now. Like one way you have a lot of legacy and limited understandings and policy constraints, and then on the other hand, you are building something which is very hard to replace.
Well, it's also worth saying, isn't it, Eva? We talked about the military side. We haven't really touched upon, and I guess it's worth just saying there is a kind of a whole different dynamic to discuss when it comes to civilian contracts. NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, paid, I think, a £330 million contract for a new data rollout platform. The British Medical Association has since said the whole project threatens to undermine public trust in data. And I guess the question it comes back to, you trust a company with sensitive data and a case for much greater scrutiny, given the range of areas it works, military, civilian use. The company says, though, it doesn't store, it doesn't collect this data, it selects through the data. Is that a different way of looking at it? Does it not avoid your wider point, which is still about the architecture, which ultimately is not open to competition?
It is. And regarding the data side, when you train the models, you need data. So you use the data one way or the other. And even if you don't store it, you still use the data in a way, and to identify the patterns and so on. So you still build it. And when we talk about personal data, which is in Europe under GDPR, very restricted, and especially, for example, juveniles, children with disabilities, which are in some countries even equal to national security level sensitivity, because it's very vulnerable data. Then the how the data gets used, we don't have the full transparency how the data is used. One thing is what is said, but what is lacking is full transparency and how we govern this data. And no system is like you just pour the slightly Excel data in and you get all the magic wisdom out and nothing happens in between. The information flows between the systems. So you build the architectural and IT dependencies over time, and the more data you pour in, the more complex it gets and harder it is to get out of it. This is the unfortunate side with anything major, and whoever has done major investments in IT systems, they know exactly how painful it is and very expensive.
Eva, it is great to talk to you tonight and great to get an understanding of the wider concern about this. It's easy to, with a triage of information about so many world events, to miss this. We have invited, and we are hoping that Alex Karp will come onto the programme at some point to put the Palantir case ahead. But Eva, thank you so much for talking to us tonight. The security analyst, Eva Sula.